I learned how to make coffee for one the hard way. For 31 years, I always made 2 cups. One for me, one for my husband, Gerald. Same mugs, same spots on the kitchen counter. Same quiet mornings before the world woke up. After he passed, I kept making 2 cups for almost a month before I noticed. I'd pour the second one down the drain every morning without thinking. The way you keep setting a place at the table for someone who isn't coming home. That's grief, I suppose. The body remembers what the mind is still trying. Gerald died on a Wednesday in late October, 3 years ago now. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. The doctor said he probably didn't feel much pain, and I held on to that like a life raft for a long time. We had 31 years together in that house, the white colonial on Sycamore Drive with the wraparound porch he built himself the summer our son turned 12. Gerald was proud of that porch. He'd sit out there every evening after dinner, just watching the neighborhood settle into night. I can still see him out there, coffee mug in hand, perfectly at peace. My son, Donovan, was 43 when his father died. He flew in from Phoenix with his wife, Renata, and their 2 kids. I was grateful to have them there. The house felt enormous and hollow in those first days, and having family around made the silence feel less permanent. Donovan handled the funeral arrangements, which I appreciated. I wasn't in any state to make decisions about flower arrangements or which photo to use for the program. What I didn't realize, standing at Gerald's graveside in that gray October wind, was that I was also standing at the beginning of something else entirely, something that would take me 2 years to fully understand. Donovan and Renata stayed for 2 weeks after the funeral. The kids went back to school remotely, and Renata said she could work from anywhere, so there was no rush. I fed everyone, and we watched old family movies and cried together and laughed at the memories. And I thought, this is what family does. They show up. When they left, Donovan hugged me at the door and said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in this big house. We should talk about what makes sense long term." I told him I'd be fine. I'd lived in that house for over 30 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every draft in winter, where the light fell on Sunday mornings. It was mine. It was Gerald's and mine. But Donovan called every few days after that, and the conversation started to shift. Had I thought about downsizing? Had I looked into senior communities? What about the upkeep? Was I managing the yard, the gutters, the heating system? Each question was reasonable on its own. Together, they started to feel like something being assembled piece by piece into an argument I hadn't agreed to have. A year after Gerald died, Donovan called and said he and Renata had been thinking. His company was letting him go fully remote. Renata's family was on the East Coast. My house was large, it was paid off, and I was alone. What if they moved in? They could help with the house, keep me company, split some of the costs. He framed it as doing me a favor. I should have asked more questions. I should have asked what splitting costs meant. And who exactly would be splitting what? I should have asked why, if the arrangement was meant to help me, it required me to give up the master bedroom because it was more practical for them to have more space with the children. I should have asked a lot of things. Instead, I said yes, because I was lonely, and because he was my son, and because I believed that family takes care of each other. They moved in on a Saturday in November. Renata brought a decorator with her. I noticed that first, though I didn't say anything. The decorator walked through my home with a clipboard and made notes, and I stood in my own kitchen wondering why I felt like a guest at a showing. Within a month, the living room had been repainted. Renata said the old color was dated. Within 2 months, Gerald's armchair, the one he'd had since before we were married, the one our kids used to fall asleep in watching cartoons, was moved to the garage because it didn't fit the new aesthetic. I asked Donovan about it, and he said, "Mom, it was falling apart. Renata just wants the place to look nice." I started spending more time in my bedroom. By the following spring, I noticed my name had been taken off the home Wi-Fi account and replaced with Renata's. Small thing, maybe, but I had to ask her for the password to connect my own laptop in my own house. She gave it to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And I thought about Gerald's chair in the garage and didn't say anything. There were other small things. Renata would make grocery runs and stock the kitchen with foods I didn't eat, and bill them to the shared account we'd set up, which was supposed to be for household expenses. She redecorated the guest room, which she called the spare room, without asking, even though my sister Patricia stayed in that room whenever she visited. When Patricia came for Easter, she had to sleep on a pull-out couch because the guest room had become Renata's home office. My sister Patricia is 66, 2 years younger than me. She taught high school history for 28 years and then, in her second act, went back to school and became a licensed family law attorney. She works part-time now, mostly taking cases she believes in. Patricia has always been the sharper one, the one who reads the fine print and asks the follow-up question. When she visited that Easter and saw the pull-out couch, she looked at me with an expression I recognized, the one she used to give me when we were teenagers, and she thought I was making a mistake. "How are things really going, Evelyn?" she asked. I said, "Fine, because what else do you say to your sister when you're not ready to say the truth out loud yet?" The truth was this. I had started to feel invisible in my own home. Not all at once. Gradually, the way water rises. Renata had taken over the kitchen scheduling, the cleaning schedule, the calendar on the refrigerator. She made decisions about the house and informed me of them afterward as a courtesy. Donovan seemed to genuinely not notice, or if he noticed, he'd grown so used to deferring to Renata that the habit had become indistinguishable from agreement. I want to be careful here, because I know how this sounds. I'm not a woman who needs to be in control of everything. I raised 2 children. I managed a household for 3 decades. I know how to share space, and how to compromise, and how to let things go. But there's a difference between choosing to let something go and having it taken from you while you're still standing there. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in August. I came downstairs to find Renata on the phone in the kitchen, speaking to someone about home insurance. She was providing her name as the primary policyholder. I stood in the doorway and listened for a moment before she saw me. And when she did, she didn't stop the call. She held up one finger just a moment and finished what she was saying before hanging up. "Renata," I said, "why are you listed as the primary on this home's insurance?" She set down the phone and looked at me with that patient, slightly tired expression she'd been wearing more often lately. "Evelyn, we've been managing all the house expenses. It just made more sense administratively." "This is my house," I said. "Of course," she said, "but Donovan and I are the ones keeping everything running." I went to find my son. Donovan was in the study, Gerald's study, which had become Donovan's office, on a video call. I waited in the hallway until it ended, then knocked. He looked up with the expression of someone who already knew what the conversation was going to be about and had already decided not to change anything. I told him about the insurance. I told him about the grocery account and the repainting and Gerald's chair in the garage and Patricia sleeping on a pull-out couch at Easter. I told him that I felt like a guest in my own home and that things needed to change. He listened. And when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. And then he said, "Mom, Renata and I have put a lot into this house. We've been paying utilities, managing repairs, handling everything you couldn't handle on your own. That has value. The house isn't just yours in the practical sense anymore." I don't think he knew how those words would land. I don't think he understood what he'd just said, but I heard it clearly, and something inside me went very still. "Donovan," I said, "your father and I bought this house 32 years ago. Our names are on the deed. Your name has never been on anything." He shifted in his chair. "There are ways to look at that differently." I left the room. I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does when she can hear something in my voice. I told her everything, not the Easter version where I said things were fine, but the real version. All of it. The insurance, the account, what Donovan had said about the house not being just mine anymore. Patricia was quiet for a long moment when I finished. "Evelyn," she said, "I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to go to your filing cabinet and pull out the deed to the house." I did. My name was on it. Gerald's name was crossed with the transfer documentation we'd filed after he passed, which moved sole ownership to me. Donovan's name appeared nowhere. "Good," Patricia said. "Don't let that document out of your sight." "I'm coming." She drove 6 hours from Richmond. She didn't tell me what time she'd arrive. She just came. She pulled into the driveway on a Thursday evening while I was sitting on the front porch, my porch. The one Gerald built, drinking tea and watching the light change over the neighborhood. I stood when I saw her car, and something in my chest loosened for the first time in months. She hugged me on the porch steps and whispered, "I've got you." We stayed outside for a while, talking quietly, before we went in. Renata was in the kitchen when we entered, and the expression that crossed her face when she saw Patricia was brief but readable. She knew Patricia was an attorney. She had always been careful around her. "Patricia," she said warmly, "we didn't know you were coming." "No," Patricia said pleasantly. "You didn't." The next morning, Patricia sat down at the kitchen table with Donovan and Renata before I'd even finished my coffee. She had a folder with her. I sat across from my son and thought about Gerald and about how much I wished he were here, not to fight, but just to be beside me. Patricia placed a copy of the deed on the table. She placed a copy of the home insurance policy listing Renata as primary. She placed 3 months of household account statements. She did this slowly and without drama, the way someone lays out evidence when they want it to be understood and not argued with. "I'm not here to threaten anyone," she said. "I'm here because my sister called me, and when my sister calls me sounding like that, I come. Donovan, you were raised in this house. Your father worked 30 years to own it outright. Your mother's name is the only name on this deed. Everything else, the insurance, the accounts, any arrangement you've made here, was done without legal authority and will be undone." Donovan looked at the folder and then at me, and then at his wife. And for the first time since that conversation in the study, he looked like my son again. Not the stranger who had told me this house wasn't just mine anymore, but the boy who used to fall asleep in Gerald's armchair watching Saturday morning cartoons. "Mom," he said. I didn't say anything. I waited. "I don't know when things got this far," he said. He looked at Renata when he said it. Renata started to say something. Patricia very calmly raised one hand. Let him finish. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. It was not easy. There were things said that will take time to forgive and longer to forget. But there was also, underneath all of it, a son who had let himself be gradually led somewhere he never would have chosen to go if he'd been paying attention. I believe that. I have to believe that. By the end of it, we had agreed in writing, because Patricia insisted on writing that the household financial accounts would be restructured with my name as primary. The insurance would be corrected. The guest room would be restored before Patricia's next visit, and we would sit down, the 3 of us, with a neutral family counselor, to talk about what a respectful living arrangement actually looked like, or whether a living arrangement made sense at all. Renata was quiet through most of this. She agreed to everything, with the careful stillness of someone recalculating. Later that evening, after dinner, Donovan and I sat on the porch. The neighborhood was dark and quiet. The air smelled like late summer, like cut grass, and the beginning of something cooling. "I let things go too far," he said. "I kept telling myself it was easier, that Renata was just handling things. I stopped looking at what things actually were." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached over and put my hand over his. He was 44 years old and he was still my boy. That doesn't go away. It gets complicated, it gets lost sometimes, but it doesn't go away. "Your father built this porch," I said. "Did you know it took him the whole summer?" He'd never built anything like it before. He just decided he was going to learn how. Donovan looked at the porch boards under our feet. "I remember. He let me hand him nails. You were 12. You thought you were the whole construction crew." He laughed, the real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in too long. We sat there until the streetlights came on, not talking much, just being in the place where we had always been a family. The coffee would still be for 1 in the mornings. Gerald wasn't coming back, and some of the quiet in that house would always belong to his absence. But this house was mine. It would remain mine. And the son who sat beside me on that porch, the real one, the one his father raised, was still there too. Patricia left the next morning with the folder tucked under her arm. At the door, she squeezed my hand and said, "Call me the minute anything changes." "I will," I said. She looked at me the way she's looked at me our whole lives, like she already knows what I'm going to do before I do it, and mostly approves. "You waited too long to call me, Evelyn." "I know," I said. "I kept hoping it would sort itself out." "Things like this don't sort themselves," she said. "That's why we have each other." She drove away, and I stood on the porch and watched her car disappear down Sycamore Drive. Then I went inside and made my coffee 1 cup and sat at my kitchen table in my house. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like mine again. I think about what I would tell another woman in my position. Another woman who finds herself slowly edged out of her own life, who keeps giving the benefit of the doubt because the people taking advantage are people she loves. I would tell her that love is not the same as permission. I would tell her that the people who belong in your life are the ones who remember that it's your life. Gerald used to say, "Trust your gut before you trust the explanation." He was usually right. The house still smells like him sometimes, early in the morning when the light comes through the kitchen window at a certain angle. I don't think it will ever stop. I don't want it to. It's my house. It always was. And now everyone knows it.